Once upon a time, there was a lady named
Tove Jansson,
and she wrote the Moomins. And everybody loved it so much that humanity just collectively decided to readapt the Moomins about once every decade. There's the 60s one, the 70s one, the 90s one, the puppet one, the cursed one, the live-action one. There's a pink one, and a green one, and a blue one, and a yellow one. And they're all made out of Moomin goodness, and they all feel just as great. The 90s anime is the adaptation that truly gained worldwide fame. And while I didn't grow up with it, the internet led me to fall down the Moomins rabbit hole. And now, I love the Moomins so much, you guys. You really gotta give credit to a piece of work when it remains so relatable and familiar to people throughout more than half a century. If you want to give the original books a read, I totally recommend it. So, keeping up with tradition, it was about time that humans decided to come up with a Moomin adaptation for the 2000s, seeing there was a pretty big gap there. And that's how we ended up with Moomins on the Riviera. But a mere 80-minute movie wasn't enough to satisfy the world's hunger for Moomins, so they decided to make a totally new, fully CGI Moomin series. Is it any good? Why don't we find out together? I want to talk about Moominvalley. If you haven't been lucky enough to fall into the Moomins rabbit hole, allow me to give you a quick rundown. The Moomins are a family officially composed by Moomin Papa, Moomin Mama, and Moomintroll, and they all live in the Moomin house, which is in Moominvalley. Bit of an ego trip there. Other characters include Little Mai, who is rude but means well, most of the time, Sniff, who wants to be rich and is a bit of a scaredy cat, Snorkmaiden, who's more girly and romantic, and Snuffkin, Moomintroll's best friend, who values freedom most of all. Their days are filled with adventures that are very cozy and slice of life with a little fantasy thrown in. Whether you are reading the books, comics, or watching an adaptation, you know that no matter how dark things get, their stories are bound to have a happy ending. And I love them. Now that we've covered that up, let's talk about the 2019 Moominvalley adaptation in particular. The story follows some general guidelines taken from both the books and the comics, though they're often bent and mashed together to form their own narratives. The characters and the universe feel about the same, just put in a different light. Also, there's an official pop album that was released with the series, and the songs are all based on the episodes, and they're all absolute bangers. You can tell right from the start that this adaptation is a bit different from the rest. Moomintroll, the main character, was aged up a bit.
It must be a baby dragon, probably the very last one on Earth and washed up by the rain.
You're so angry, even though you're so very small. Reminds me of someone else I know.
This might have been taken from the Moomins in the Riviera version, where he also sounds a bit older than in the anime.
I must learn how to say no.
Me voimme olla ensimmäiset, jotka kiipeävät
The plot lines also feel more streamlined rather than episodic. There is a clear continuity in the sequence of the chapters. However, the question isn't just what differences are there, but instead what they represent, and what the series does with such changes. The creators themselves have expressed this wish to show the progression of Moomintroll's character and how he changes within a year.
And I think another part of where we started to, crack the code of what we should be doing was when we thought, and I can't remember how this came about now, but it was when we thought this should be a seasonal show. It should be starting in spring and going through, telling the year in the life of Moomintroll.
Like they said, it's a seasonal show. There's supposed to be a sense of development here. So is there actual development? Let's take a look. When I said Moomintroll was aged a bit for the show, it wasn't just an impression. This was a deliberate choice made by the writers.
It's really fun to play with as writers when you have a character who's in sort of halfway between childhood and adulthood, and they're moving back and forth.
Yeah, it's very, as Nick says, it's very useful to have a push and pull with a character like Moomintroll.
They wanted to have this character who's still figuring himself out and learning to assert his own voice. One of the first lines of the very first episode makes this pretty clear.
You need to learn to stand up for yourself.
Oh, nice. There's our theme right there. But how did we get to this line? What made Moomintroll come to this conclusion? Let's watch what comes before it. In a dream sequence, Moomintroll is invited for a floating cloud joyride by his friend Snorkmaiden, while this banger of a song plays in the background. They fly through the beautiful scenery of Moominvalley until the dream falls apart when Moomintroll hears a knock at the door. So he gets up, looks at a picture of himself as a baby, and says,
You need to learn to stand up for yourself.
but like, why does he say that? What in the dream gives us the idea that he's not standing up for himself? Is it because he's scared to do it at first? But he wasn't forced to jump, and later on he's actually enjoying it. Is it just something that he says every morning? Why does he feel like that's something he needs to change about himself? The rest of the episode leans in really hard on that theme, but the conclusion isn't what you would expect. The Moomin family is visited by the Mimble and her numerous children, who all insist on staying despite being a bother, and the Moomins are too nice to tell her to leave. Little Mai, the Mimble's most outspoken daughter, insists that Moomintroll speaks up and kicks the lady out, acting as the voice of reason.
Why don't you just tell her to go?
That wouldn't be kind.
You mean it wouldn't be easy?
And then Moomintroll never does that. Instead, he builds the Mimble a new house, and it just sort of floats away. In a turtle. But no one ever had to ask her to leave. It's interesting how Moomintroll solved the problem on his own terms, taking the longer, kinder route instead of being rude, which is something that he never wanted to be in the first place. However, the story doesn't end there. You still get scenes of Moomintroll refraining from speaking his mind or looking at the photograph of him as a baby, like he knows there are still things he must change about himself. Following the seasonal nature of the show, we see the various adventures that Moomintroll and his friends have throughout the year. Raising a dragon, exploring a deserted island, making new friends, meeting old ones, etc. Within that lot, there are 2 episodes that I want to explore in a little more detail. In the 5th episode, The Golden Tale, Moomintroll is cast to play the role of his father on a play. But he's not that into the idea from the beginning. His dad keeps on making the story more and more gimmicky until it becomes so absurd that it no longer resembles the truth, and Moomintroll snaps and says that he won't do it anymore. You're giving up on your dream? No, Dad, I'm giving up on yours. 3 episodes later, in Monsterfish, Moomin Papa tells the family a fishing story that makes him look like a hero while making his son look useless. Moomintroll complains about it, but then he realizes that he can take control of the narrative and make himself be the cool one instead. By the end, both father and son learn how to work together and create an engaging narrative where they are both important. Part of Moomintroll's journey involves stepping out of his dad's shadow and becoming his own person.
Moomintroll's living, with his father and his mother, with, a father who, as you're saying, does tell a lot of stories and is someone to live up to. So Moomintroll is sort of always trying to slightly define his own space from Moomin Papa because, he's Moomin Papa, but, he wants to be Moomintroll as well. He thought of his own character.
In these 2 episodes, you have a clear parallel between the use of storytelling and its role in establishing someone's identity. From Moomintroll merely trying to fit into a role that wasn't really made for him, to learning how to create a role that actually suits him.
I think that her characters are imaginative and they tell stories to each other, and it's from telling stories to each other that we learn about human nature. If you sit down and watch, when we've done the 26 episodes, you will see a recurrent theme of storytelling and power of imagination to change the way that you think about the world and other people.
We see that stories can change not only the way others perceive you, but also how you perceive yourself. In Monsterfish especially, the line between reality and fiction is rather blurred.
I think that every time you can watch it again and again and think that, wait a minute, where does it change?
At first, it really seems like Moomintroll took the narrative advice literally and became a hero out of nowhere, until you realize that's just the story he's been telling about himself, which is already much better than just passively listening as others try to write out your role for you. Except he really didn't do anything extraordinary in life then, at least not in the same level as in his stories. The final episode presents us with the perfect scenario for Moomintroll to finally prove himself. He wakes up in the middle of winter while his family is still hibernating, and he sees himself completely alone. Hibernation, according to Moomin Papa, is a tradition that was started by the Moomin ancestors, but Moomintroll is kind of sick of it by this point. Either way, he's awake now. He eventually comes across Tiki, a family friend who doesn't hibernate and who lives in the Moomin bathhouse during the winter. Moomintroll takes shelter with her, and she tells him not to open this one door in the bathhouse. He tries to resist the urge to do it, messing around with Tiki's stuff, but his curiosity gets the best of him and he opens the door, which contained his ancestor. Yeah, I'm not sure how the concept of evolution works there. Tiki makes him chase down his ancestor, and he does, but nearly dies trying to do it. His ancestor saves him, and Moomintroll makes his peace with the hibernation tradition. He goes back to sleep, but not before changing the picture in the frame from baby Moomin to current Moomin, tying up that loose end. Except, in terms of extraordinary feats, this is probably the worst episode to use as an example. Let's recap what Moomintroll does. Question family traditions, disobey direct orders, struggle to correct his mistakes, refuse to ask for help, nearly die, resign to follow the traditions that he was so opposed to at the beginning. He doesn't save anyone or does anything cool. The very act of opening the door was probably the dumbest thing he did all season. Though, right before he opens the door, he takes a picture of himself looking cool, and that is the photo that he chooses to put on the frame next to his bed. Why would he choose that picture to represent his growth? Why does that picture mean that he has learned to stand up for himself? As dumb as it was to open up that door, and as troublesome as it was to undo the damage he caused, opening that door was Moomintroll's idea. Until that point, none of his other adventures had actually been his idea. They had been kickstarted because of events either out of his control, or caused by someone else, or forced upon him, or they stood as the result of something that wasn't his first choice. Even if it was a poor choice, and even if it did lead to a lot of trouble, by opening that door, Moomintroll finally took control of his own living narrative. As he goes back to sleep, the audience is greeted by the last banger of the album, a song called The Author by Roseburg. Not only is the title a pretty blatant reference to the idea of storytelling and the power that it brings, but the lyrics could not make it any more obvious that making mistakes is part of the authorship process. As they say, and yes, things have happened, but you needed to learn. Yeah, you learn that the pages are quite easy to turn if you let them turn. The show actually puts a lot of thought into its soundtrack. Even though the music styles seem dissonant at times, they are very calculated moves.
In fact, you can hear it from the music. It's like...
Yes, the music was massively helpful. So the heightened music tells you that you're going into the fantasy. So there are clues all the time.
So the real lesson here isn't whether Moomintroll finally did something cool or not, or learned how to tell people off. What matters most is the fact that he has taken control of his story. As Little Mai puts it,
You'll never have a face of your own until you've learned to stand up for yourself. Believe me.
your very existence is defined by how you see yourself and the paths you choose to take. And even if that path leads to a lot of trouble, if Moomintroll has decided that this was a real growth moment for him, who are we to say that he was wrong? But you might say, well, fine, but he still hasn't really learned his lesson. And to that I say, you're right, he hasn't. But this isn't the full story. Here, we have explored a very explicit theme of standing up for yourself. But what if I told you there is a secret, sneakier theme hidden inside Moominvalley? A lesson that Moomintroll himself hasn't realized that he must learn.
Did you know it's officially spring tomorrow? A little bird told me there's someone special who calls in the spring. Now, what was his name?
Snuffkin.
One of the constants of the Moominverse is that Moomintroll always longs for Snuffkin. This adaptation doesn't shy away from it, having an entire episode dedicated to Moomin eagerly awaiting his friend's return, and Snuffkin's hesitation to go back, thanks to the value that he places upon his own freedom and how suffocating he finds to be overly admired. The following episode, The Last Dragon in the World, makes this dynamic even more clear. Moomintroll catches a baby dragon and he intends to make it his and Snuffkin's secret. No matter how much Moomintroll loves the dragon though, he only has eyes for Snuffkin, who in turn thinks that dragons should be free instead of kept as pets. Moomintroll eventually releases the dragon, only to go right back to hanging out with Snuffkin. Remember how I said that the soundtrack choices were meticulously planned? When Moomintroll is walking along with Snuffkin attempting to train the dragon, we've got this lovely jam playing. Love me with all of your heart. That's all I want, love. Love me with all of your heart, or not at all. And just promise me this, that you'll give me all your kisses, every winter, every summer, every fall. I wish I was making this up.
The song, and I love the song.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
We are shown, be it through the visuals, the plot, or the soundtrack, what Moomintroll really wants. To be loved, eternally and unconditionally, with everything his lover has. Throughout the series, we get to explore more of the friendship between Moomin and Snuffkin. When Moomintroll is describing his idea of a perfect summer, Snuffkin is an essential piece of the puzzle. It's Snuffkin's opinions that he values the most. It's Snuffkin that he waits for. It's Snuffkin that he turns to for safety.
Was I your best friend?
Yes. Well, after Snuffkin.
In the 9th episode, Night of the Groke, Moomintroll is confronted with the Groke's terrifying figure, this sort of loco monster who represents all your fears and freezes everything around her. She chases the characters around for a while, but Moomintroll realizes that what she really wants is the light they carry with them. He comes up with a plan to get rid of her, but as he puts it into motion, he sees himself reflected in the Groke's eyes.
Perhaps she just reflects our own fears.
He sees his own fears reflected back at him, and he seems to understand the Groke a little better after that. The Groke chases a light she will most likely never reach, and even if she does, she will freeze it out and kill it. And although Moomintroll understands her yearning, he fails to see that it's the same as his own, and that he is destined to suffer the same fate.
I mean, it's such a beautiful theme, that to learn to love with an open hand. And it's brilliant between Snuffkin and Moomintroll.
When Moomintroll lets the dragon go, you would assume that he has learned his lesson. To love with an open hand, to be truly free, to let Snuffkin go. And yet, even after he releases the dragon, he goes right back to where he was. To the same yearning as before. He understands that leaving is Snuffkin's choice, and he would hate to get in the way of his friend's freedom, but that doesn't stop him from being upset whenever Snuffkin goes away, or from wishing for him to come back. I mean, if you wanted to see the true impact of this theme, you wouldn't even have to look past the very first song in the series. When they say, "I close my eyes, I take a breath, please say you'll never leave, 'cause it's in your hands." Moomintroll might not be the hero that he wants to be, but he's at least learning to take control of his own narrative. What he doesn't know is how to deal with the things that are out of his control. He wants a kind of love that can't be given to him, at least not in the way things are now. And I don't think he understands that, which is why he changes one picture in his bedroom, but not the other one. Needless to say, I am very excited for Season 2. Thank you for watching.
Well, hello there. It was very cool of you to watch this video. If you had a good time, you can do those nice things such as liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the notification bell. You can also follow me on Twitter and tell all your friends about me and how much I love the Moomins. You can leave your opinions in a comment down below, especially if they are about how much you love the Moomins too. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye! Guys, I got a harmonica, so I'm basically Snuffkin now. Who am I kidding? I'll always be Moomintroll.